Hello. Hello. I we deducting I have a quota for the week. Hello. Yeah, so how's it going? Uh I feel like I'm trying to think of, like, first of all, obviously, like, how was my day? And it's interesting, like I said, the look. She gives when the law receives that look, what happens? I don't know. Um, but it's interesting because I'm trying to think about what I can, like, complain. I actually I came in here without really an idea of what I was going to say. Like, I don't really have a topic. I'm thinking of, like, there's a couple of topics that I might broach the subject upon, but I don't broach, by the way. I don't poach. I poach, broach. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, the point is that, like, what can I complain about today? It was okay day. One of the things that struck me is I was looking through. You remember that dude I was training, right? I was looking through his emails, and like, he's like, he's writing. He comes off. It's so weird because I'm speaking. By the way, notice. So the first thing to notice here is that I'm speaking in generalities. I saw an email, but I'm going to tell you. I mean, I don't mean it in the way that you might. You guys are. This is what happened. All right, we'll talk about that. The point is that I was looking at the emails, and I said to myself, like, "Oh, that's an interesting email," but because it contained words, but really it was the context, right? So what I took away from it. I'm sorry. This is Friday. Happy Friday, guys. What was it? We Super Drop Thursday. So I'm like, I don't know. Looking for the weekend, Friday. I don't know. Feel good Friday. Feel good Friday. Let's go with feel good Friday. Anyway, the point is that, so I was looking at the email and I saw, he's like, they're funny. Forgive me. I'm sorry. They're funny. Like, there's a sort of humor. And I suppose that it's sort of like, I don't know if you ever remember that, but it's sort of like, oh, like, get on my level, because it's sort of like there's like levels, and you can see my eyes are already tearing up. There's some stuff for you, right? Like, I can't tell you what the email said, but I can tell you my eyes are tearing up because that's the issue, right? Like, I can tell he's gonna get the promotion over me, right? And it's interesting because, in all seriousness, right? In all seriousness, it's interesting because there's sort of this, like, I think if you have a certain level, I don't know if it's testosterone, because maybe that's not the right word, but if you have a certain level of, like, not caring, you tend to not have your hair graying, but also it's sort of like, I feel like that's a turn on, right? And I'm trying to sort of, like, I try to make fun of the whole thing, because even though I'm caught up in, like I said, 511 thoughts, every day we're going to do this show. There is sort of this, and it is a show, by the way. There is sort of this idea that, like, I'm not necessarily a perfectly willing participant, right? And then obviously that begs the question of, well, is your will free? Like, have they taken your will? Taken it, or I don't know. But it is interesting because, like, I can tell, like, he's already created a very good impression over our main boss. And it's sort of like, well, what are we going to do now? So it's interesting. I just feel like I feel, because I'm secretly, like, obviously I'm jealous, but I'm also, because there's sort of this, I have an attitude of, like, of course I can do anything, right? Like, I believe I can do anything, and I think, more importantly, I think that there is, and if I'm being honest, right, if I'm allowed to be honest in these 10 minutes, right. There is sort of this idea that, like, I feel as though, I feel very confident in my abilities, but I also feel like I'm not obligated to show them to you, right? I think I've talked about that before, but it's sort of like, like, I remember, I don't know, like, I've talked about this recently with someone else, but remember, like, sort of we talked about the basketball commercials, and it's sort of like, oh, there's a sort of Michael Jordan versus, like, Mia Hamm, I think was her name. Anyway, it was a Gatorade commercial, and I'm sure, I'm just giving you the pure sensory details here. It was sort of like the point was that, like, it was sort of like, oh, I suppose it was like women versus men, something. I don't know. I think it was like a woman versus a man, and what happens, right? And the idea is that the woman can do anything better than Michael Jordan, but we're talking about Michael Jordan here, right? So. I mean, we're not talking about just any person. We're talking about, like, sort of Michael Jordan. Like, come on. But the point is that it's interesting because I believe that, like, it's sort of like everybody can get that. And it's interesting how, I suppose the question becomes, and this is an interesting question, I hear a lot of people talk about how, we're all about individuality and helping people become sort of the best versions of themselves. And it's an interesting scenario, because if you're being genuine, then you have to ask yourself, what does that process look like, right? And because I don't know, I know that, for me, like I said, like I have you tell me, can I do something? Of course I can do it, right? Like, what are you talking about, But I think it's necessary to have that self-confidence, but I also think it's sort of like, well, I don't want to be the system's, whipping post, right? So it's sort of, there's this, and I do believe that, I don't know, like, it's an interesting sort of dynamic there. And a lot of people, do we look at these things through, like, sort of a genuine lens? I don't know. All I can say is that there are certain people who are better socially than others. And I think that one of the things I was going to talk about is, like, social anxiety, because I have it, obviously. I think we talked about how, I have a lot of social anxiety. And the question is, there's sort of this idea that, like, well, you have social anxiety because you care too much, right? And I think like I said, I feel like we're going over the same stuff, but it's interesting because it's interesting how pervasive these issues are. And I think I feel like I'm repeating myself again, but it is like, you just see it come up again and again, right? It's a daily prevalence in your life. And I'm just not sure exactly how to interpret this stuff, and I just, because I know, like, for sure I have, sort of social anxiety. And, is that because, is that purely because I care too much? Or is it just like, I believe that I might have difficulty communicating, for example, So I don't know. It's an interesting question. As you can see, we did get serious here, but because I do think that, like I said, like, I just go back to this idea that, like, I'm not convinced that, there's sort of this issue that, like, I personally believe that, I think that, I like to believe that I can do anything, but I also like to believe that I don't, because at the same time, I don't want to do anything. It's sort of like, I can do anything, but I don't want to do anything. Like, I want to not do everything, but I want to say that I can do anything, And I just, you have to, like I said, you have to ask yourself, like, do certain people, like, do they have to do more? Like, in other words, like, do we live in a world where, like, everybody, like, the effort that someone has to put in, especially to things, I don't know, like, the effort someone has to put in life, is the effort requirement all equal? Like, I don't know. Like, that's an interesting question. But if it's not equal, then what is the justification for that, right? Like, I don't know. Like, it's an interesting question. I know that, it's Friday, and I'm definitely looking forward to taking a break from my, the process of putting in time, right? And, obviously, like we said before, the need that I have to do this perhaps is based upon the idea that I've got to provide myself with certain things. And, like I said, I don't know, the extent to which, everybody has to do that. But the point is that this is interesting, right? And if you say, like, well, this stuff doesn't matter, but, like, the other stuff does, then it's that becomes a statement that would be need to be justified, right? Anyway, this is probably a fail, but it's Friday, so yeah.